I'll tell you what, nothing has changed from last year, that's for sure. I mean, the trails are exactly like they were last year. The sign is pretty much exactly like it was last year, so all that's good. You know, I hunted in here a few days last year and did see deer just about every time I came in here. It just wasn't the buck I wanted to shoot. But you know what? It excites me when I find places like this that it's historically used year after year after year. And last year when I was in here and I was scouting, I could just kind of feel the size of these trails, and it looked so worn over the years, and it looked like historical sign. And I was right, because it's pretty much the same way this year. Well, when I find that historical sign, that really excites me, because I know the deers are at home and they stay for quite a while in that area. Now, it may not be the buck I want to shoot. It may not be, you know, something that I'm really get excited about, but it does tell me that the deers hang in there year after year. And then once you find that historical sign, then you can start breaking that, you know, you can start breaking that sign apart. And you can start looking for what I call the buck sign, or the faint trails, or the small little rubs off the main trails. Now what we have here is just a big run that goes right around the side of this hill, and it's coming up out of this thicket. You can see this thicket behind me, and it's just really thick. Well, last year, since this was my first year hunting in here, I was sitting here probably the third day I was ever in here, the third day of bow season last year. And I came in here and I just sat up behind a tree. That's it. I just got up behind a tree because, you know, I was wanting to be immobile, and I didn't want to set a blind up yet, and I didn't really want to set a tree up yet. I just kind of wanted to watch. I wanted to kind of, you know, watch and see how the deer was moving. And the first deer I ever saw on this property come right around the side of this hill where this thick stuff is, and come right through here, and I could just see his body moving through here. I don't know what it was, a buck or a doe, but I just seen that deer move through there, and that was at 1 o'clock in the day. I stay here a little bit longer, and then here comes some more off of this way, you know, out of this way, and then some more come up out of this way. So 3 different places from this little place right here, I saw deer coming. Now, what that told me was that this area right here is a big cross trail. You'll have trails coming this way, you got trails coming this way, and you got a big main trail coming around that way. What these deers do is they get in these places. It's almost like a community hole. You know, it's almost like a community spot where they just all cross. Now, you can sit there and see a lot of deer and maybe shoot a doe or something for the freezer in places like that. But I really don't like places. I don't really like to sit up in places like that to hunt. And here's why. The more eyes and the more ears, and especially the more noses you have in that place, these community holes or that community cross trails, the more chances you take of the wind shifting the wrong way, just like that, maybe, you know, blowing the whole thing, and it don't take but one, you know. And so what I like to do is I like to kind of get off of that main sign and get into the places where them deers are headed from the community, you know, cross trails and the community hole, I call it, into these places where they're, you know, going, and they get off to theirself. Especially bucks, they'll get off to theirself. That's why these faint trails and this small sign that you've heard me talk about is so important, especially in the late season. So a lot of times I think that we get too caught up in all this big sign, and you see this big trail here like that one, and you see a big trail going around here, and you see it, and you go, oh man, I'm going to set my tree stand right here. I'm going to set my blind right here. And then, you know, the second, third day in there after hunting it, you know, you get busted and it blows everything out of there, and then you got problems, you know, for a few days. So I like to get off of that sign and try to find where them deers are headed. I'm going to put a camera right up here where the same tree I put last year, where every day, I mean just every other day, I got pictures. Just mostly does, and you know, a lot of them was probably the same deer day after day, but just does and does and does and does. But right there about the middle of October, I began to get some bucks in this spot right in here coming through. And that's when you sort of want to start focusing on the places where them bucks are moving at when they come through these community places like this. And a lot of times your mature bucks won't come through these places, you know, unless it's right in the middle of the rut or right there in the seeking phase, the first couple of weeks of November, maybe in some parts of the country, you'll find a buck come cruising through one of these places. But very seldom will a big mature buck come right through all of these, you know, big cross trails and everything else. So I like to get off, of this main sign and get off into these places where they're going to stay a bit, because they're just coming through right here. But I want to get to where they're going to kind of, you know, stay a little bit, and there's not so many eyes and ears and noses to deal with. So when you are out scouting, I just wanted to say, when you're out scouting, don't get all excited and start building stands. If you still build stands, you know, some people still build stands, you know, like we did back in the day, or put a blind up or put a tree stand up right over that community stuff. Walk out of that community stuff in your preseason scouting and find out where them deers are probably going to go and spend some time at, and that's kind of where you want to kind of focus at. Now, one thing I like to do, and you've heard me talk about this in videos past, but I just want to kind of go back over it for people who maybe is new to the channel. I don't really like, now I'm not going to say I won't if I have to, but I don't like sitting right up in the bedding. And I don't really like setting up right here in all this sign here and where they're feeding at. I like to try to focus, especially if I'm going to be hunting on in a ground blind or just behind a tree. I like to focus for, you know, the halfway, you know, between the bedding and the feeding. I want to kind of get right in the halfway mark to where they're traveling. And there's reasons for that. One, if I was to set up right in here where there's so many deer that's crossing, a lot of times they're on high alert, okay? They're just on high alert. Whereas if you get off of that sign and you get over there where they're a little bit more comfortable, maybe not right in their bedding, but they're going to their bedding or they're to their food source, it's almost like that they're never not alert, you know, but it's almost like they drop their guard because they've got in their mind a certain place they want to go, whether it's back to bed or whether it's to food. They got a place they want to go. You know, it's kind of like when you are driving and, you know, while you're driving down the interstate or you're driving between, you know, when you leave your home to your destination, you know, you're not looking at every single thing and you're not just alert all the time until you start getting closer to where you want to be. And the closer you want to be, you know, the point B destination, that's when you're alert and you start looking for the right exits, and you start looking for the little side roads, and you start looking for the little details. Well, you know, there's a stop sign, then you turn left, and then, you know, then you'll see a building up there. You start looking for little bitty things, and you're a little bit more alert. Well, it's not much different when it comes to deer. And so what I like to do is I like to set up where they're going to and from, and you find that by finding the correct trails to set up on, or set off of rather. Don't set on them, but set off of them. And a lot of times they'll just come through there and they're not so alert. So, you know, like last year, you know, I know there's the deer feed up here. Actually the road's like right up the hill here, and there's a bunch of fields over in here. And last year I saw the deers when the leaves was off of here. I saw them coming across the road up there, down in this hill and going right through here, or, you know, they was going, and I feel like that's where they're feeding mostly. And when you go out at night, you just look over and there's a bunch of deer over there, you know, in the fields. And down in this thick stuff, I think, is where they primarily bed. Well, you know, you notice I'm not going back here in this big thick stuff. I'm staying right on the outside edges. I'm finding this community sign, but then I'm going off and trying to find these little trails and this little faint sign to set up on. And when I come in here to hunt, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go in here, I'm going to find the faint sign and try to hunt that, because you're going to be better off. But a lot of people come in here and they get so excited over all this huge sign, and it's not the best. And especially if you're hunting a mature buck, it's not really the best thing to do. So just some little things to remember when you're out scouting, especially you young hunters, or, you know, guys that's just starting or gals that's just starting. Don't look for the huge sign and set up on it. You know, it's good to find it because you know the deer are historically there, but hunt the right sign and it'll pay off for you. So anyways, I think since it's historically the same, I know exactly where I want to go to set up, and I'm going to go put another blind up there, and you know, it should be really good in here. I'm going to spend a little bit more time in here than I did last year, and I think it's going to pay off, because and let the cameras tell me exactly when to really start putting the pressure in here. But just some things to remember this deer season, and it'll make you a lot more successful.